Is President Trump's decision to make. The Iranian response was to fire another missile at Israel.
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before.
What if this war isn't just politics? What if what Donald Trump and Israel just did to Iran was predicted by name in the Bible? Not symbolically, not vaguely, specifically. Because right now, the same nations mentioned in an ancient prophecy are moving into place exactly as written. And if that's true, then this isn't just another conflict. It's the beginning of something far more serious. This didn't start with a speech. It started with a decision. For months, pressure had been building behind closed doors. Meetings, warnings, negotiations that went nowhere. Iran kept moving forward. Missile systems expanding, nuclear activity increasing, and intelligence reports began to change. Not someday, not maybe, imminent. That word changes everything, because when a threat becomes imminent, waiting is no longer safe. So Israel made a choice: strike first. Not to send a message, not to warn, but to remove the threat before it could fully form. Targets weren't random, they were precise. Military Paliada, missile launch systems, deep infrastructure tied to weapons development. This was not a small operation, and it was not symbolic. It was calculated. And here's what makes this different. Israel didn't frame this as retaliation.
Before we act, we don't talk.
It called it survival. Let that sink in. Because when a nation starts using the word survival, it means the stakes have already crossed a line. But then, something happened that changed everything. The United States didn't step back, it stepped in, fast. Warships were already in position, aircraft already in the air. Within hours, this wasn't just Israel's fight anymore. It became something bigger, something global. In the moment that happened, this stopped being just another headline. It became a turning point. But here's where it gets critical. Because once the US entered the picture, the reaction wasn't just from Iran. It came from everywhere connected to it. And that's when the situation began to spread. The moment Iran responded, everything changed. This was no longer a single strike. It became a chain reaction. Missiles were launched, not one, not two, waves. And they weren't aimed at empty land. They were aimed at cities, at people. The kind of weapons that give you minutes, sometimes less, to find shelter. 12 minutes, that's the window. 12 minutes to grab your family. 12 minutes to run. 12 minutes to hope you make it underground in time. Now imagine that happening over and over again. Sirens, explosions, silence, then another wave. But Iran didn't stop there, because Iran doesn't fight alone. It has a network, a web of forces spread across the region, waiting for a moment like this. And that moment had arrived. To the north, movement. To the south, signals of readiness. Groups that had been quiet were no longer quiet. And suddenly, Israel wasn't just watching one direction, it was watching all directions. This is where it gets dangerous, because when multiple fronts begin to open at the same time, the rules change. This is no longer containment, this is expansion. And at the same time, another line was crossed. American bases in the region became targets, not indirectly, directly. Different countries, same message. Everything connected to this conflict is now part of it. Let that sink in. Because once that line is crossed, there is no clean way to step back. Only escalation. But here's what most people still don't see. This isn't just a war spreading. It's a pattern forming. And that pattern has been seen before. The shock didn't stay in one region. It moved fast. across borders, across oceans, into markets, into governments, into decisions being made behind closed doors. Because when conflict touches this many points, the world feels it. Oil prices didn't wait, they jumped. Shipping routes didn't hesitate, they shifted. One narrow stretch of water, so small on a map, suddenly held the weight of the global economy, and everyone knew it. Because if that route closes, even for a moment, everything slows down. Fuel, trade, supply, everything. Now watch closely, because this is where the lines begin to form, not on maps, but between nations. Statements were released, warnings were issued, but behind those words, positions were being chosen. Some stood firmly on one side, others watched carefully, and some were already closer to this conflict than they wanted to admit. Military activity increased, coordination increased, and then there were signals, not loud, not public, but clear enough. Alliances that had been growing quietly are now visible. And this is the part most people miss. These alliances didn't appear overnight. They've been forming for years, strengthening, aligning, moving closer together. And now, under pressure, they're being tested. But here's where it gets unsettling. Because if you step back just for a second and look at who is aligning, you start to notice something. The same regions, the same groupings, the same kind of coalition. And that's the word you need to remember, coalition. Because what's forming right now isn't random. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now pause. Step back from the headlines for a moment. Because what you're seeing is not just a conflict, it's a pattern. And that pattern was written down over 2,600 years ago. Not in a military report, not in a modern analysis, but in an ancient text, the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38. Pay attention, because this is where everything changes. Ezekiel describes a future moment, a time when a group of nations comes together against Israel. Not one nation, a coalition. Let that word settle in your mind. Coalition, multiple nations, different regions, moving together. And here's what makes this unsettling. The prophecy doesn't speak in vague terms. It names places, regions, groups. And when those names are studied, they point to real locations, modern locations. Now here's the shift. Everything you just saw, the strikes, the responses, the alliances forming, starts to line up. Not perfectly, not completely, but clearly enough to raise a question. Is this just coincidence, or is this something being set in motion? Because Ezekiel doesn't just describe chaos. He describes a structure, a formation, a coordinated movement of specific nations coming together at a specific time. And right now, those same types of alignments are beginning to appear. But here's where it gets even more precise. Because when you look closer at the names in that prophecy, you start to recognize them, not as ancient history, but as modern headlines. Now look at the names, not casually, carefully, because this is where things stop feeling distant and start feeling familiar. Ezekiel lists a group of nations, ancient names, but those names didn't disappear. They changed. They evolved into places you know today. Let's start with one, Persia. That name is clear. Persia is modern-day Iran. No guessing, no stretching. It's the same region. And right now, Iran is at the center of this conflict. Let that sink in. Now move north. Ezekiel describes a power coming from the far north, a leader, a dominant force. Most scholars connect this to the region above Israel, what we now know as Russia. And what do we see today? Russia standing close to Iran, supporting, coordinating, aligning. Now look at another set of names, Meshech, Tubal, ancient regions tied to what is now modern Turkey. And Turkey, sitting right between continents, right in the middle of these shifting alliances. Now go further south. Kush, Put, regions linked to parts of North Africa, areas that today still carry strategic weight in global conflicts. Do you see the pattern forming? This is not one nation acting alone. It's a coalition. Say that again. Coalition. Different regions, different powers moving in the same direction. And here's what makes this difficult to ignore. These exact regions are the same ones now appearing together in the current crisis. Not all at once, not fully aligned yet, but close enough to make you stop and think. Because when ancient names and modern events start lining up like this, you have to ask, what are we really looking at? Now, step back again. Don't focus on one detail. Look at the whole picture, because this is where it becomes harder to ignore. It's not just one country. It's not just one alliance. It's a coalition. There's that word again, coalition. And it keeps showing up. Different regions moving in the same direction. Russia, Iran, Turkey, parts of North Africa. Not identical, not fully locked together, but aligning, closer than before. And this isn't new. These relationships didn't appear overnight. They've been building, slowly, quietly. Military coordination, economic ties, shared interests, piece by piece. And now, under pressure, they're being revealed. This is where it gets critical, because Ezekiel didn't describe chaos. He described structure, a formation, a planned movement of nations coming together. And when you compare that structure to what's happening now, you start to see similarities. The geography lines up. North, south, east, surrounding Israel. The alliances line up. Not perfectly, but clearly enough to raise a serious question. And here's the key point. This isn't about proving anything. It's about recognizing patterns. Patterns that repeat. Patterns that were written down long before modern politics existed. And yet, here they are again, forming. But here's where the tension rises, because there's one detail that doesn't fit, one major piece that seems to be missing. And once you notice it, you can't ignore it. There's something missing, and it's not small. It's obvious once you look for it. Go back to the prophecy. Look at the list again. All those nations, all those regions, forming a coalition. But one name isn't there. Not once. Not hinted, not hidden. Completely absent. The United States. Let that sink in. Right now, the U.S. is deeply involved. Military power, strategic presence, a central player in the conflict. And yet, in one of the most detailed descriptions of a future war involving Israel, it's nowhere to be found. That silence is loud, because it raises questions no one can answer clearly. What happens to America? Is it still powerful but chooses not to act? Is it distracted, focused somewhere else? Or has something changed that removes it from the center entirely? We don't know. And that's what makes it unsettling. Because if the current moment is only the beginning, then something must happen next to shift that balance. Something big enough to change who leads and who steps back. Now think about where we are. The U.S. is active, present. But the prophecy shows a moment where it isn't. That means one thing. This isn't the final stage. Not yet. But it could be leading there. And if that's true, then what we're watching right now is not the main event. It's the setup. Now, be clear about this. What's happening right now is not the prophecy itself. Not yet. No massive invasion, no sudden collapse of armies, no supernatural intervention. Those things, according to Ezekiel, come later. So what are we seeing? We're seeing the setup, the positioning, the early stages of something that hasn't fully formed yet. And that matters because it keeps this grounded. This isn't about forcing meaning onto every headline. It's about recognizing direction, where things are moving. And right now, they are moving toward alignment, toward a coalition. There's that word again, coalition. Now, here's what the prophecy says about what comes next. It describes a moment when that coalition doesn't just exist, it acts. A coordinated move against Israel, not for revenge, not for ideology, but for gain, resources, wealth, control. And when that moment comes, it doesn't end the way people expect, because the outcome is not decided by military strength alone. It describes something different, something sudden, a disruption that stops the invasion completely and changes everything. But here's the key detail. That moment hasn't happened, which means we are here before it, in the build-up, in the alignment phase. And that should raise a bigger question. Because if this is only the beginning, then how close are we to what comes next? So now you see it, not perfectly, not completely, but clearly enough. The movement, the alignment, the coalition. It's forming, slowly, right in front of everyone. And yet, most people still see this as just another conflict, another headline, another al-harb. But what if it's not? What if this moment is part of something bigger? Because the pieces are not random, they are specific. The regions match, the alliances are familiar, and the tension keeps rising. But here's what matters most. We are not at the end, not even close. We are before it, before the full alignment, before the final move, before the moment when everything shifts at once. And when that moment comes, it won't look like a slow build anymore. It will be sudden, decisive, impossible to ignore. Now think about this. If what we're seeing right now is only the setup, then the real question is not what just happened. It's this: what happens next? Because if the pattern continues, if the coalition fully forms, then the next phase won't just affect one region. It won't just stay contained. It will pull everything in. And by the time the world realizes what it's looking at, it may already be too late to step back,